The 23-year-old lost her fight to live in the wee hours of today morning, but hers is a fight that must go forward. After the anger and outrage dies down, the voices must not be lost. And we're trying to put together a charter of solutions, something that will ensure that such cases do not recur in the future. Joining us in the studio is Neelam Krishnamurthy. She's a prominent social activist in Delhi and also someone who's been through the horror of gang rape herself. She has survived. She's still fighting the fight.
That's right. So we'll have the two of them discuss the ordeal that people face, that women face when they fight against the system just to get their voices heard. Let me quickly first go across to one of the brave ladies who joins us here in the studio, one of the survivors of a gang rape. Could you just elaborate what exactly were the problems that you faced when you tried to register your complaint, when you tried to fight this case through judiciary?
First of all, I would like to say that it's such a sad day in our lives that in the capital city, a woman was tortured, and the reason why she died is not because that something had happened, but people had inflicted that injury on her, and I'm deeply saddened by what had happened, and I'm absolutely speechless. But now coming to my the ordeal that I had to face, there was some kind of there were lapses in the investigation, yes, but I was subjected to immense humiliation at the AIIMS, the medical where I was taken for my medical examination. I was called on as in the middle of so many people. I was called on as who was raped, and the medical examiner was absolutely inhuman when she was examining me. And at the court, I had to face immense humiliation because the defense lawyer walked in with about 15-20 lawyers who kept on staring at me, tried to scare me, and there was no screen to protect my identity in the courtroom. The accused was staring into my eyes and he was trying to intimidate me. All these, yes, I was scared. My family, my friends, everyone was threatened, but nothing could actually make me take back that complaint because of whatever I had been through. And the system really needs to change its attitude. This is one of the appeal that I would like to make, that the police, the medical examiners need to change their attitude. There should be some kind of a sensitivity program which needs to be conducted so that the police and the medical examiners should know the kind of case that they are dealing with. Any case in this country would fall flat if there are no proper investigation, if the prosecution doesn't work properly. And we are talking about legal reforms here, but we cannot achieve anything if it is not backed with proper investigative and investigative measures. The police should be very, very careful. They should conduct proper examination, because that's one of the crucial factors in any of these cases.
Just stay with us for a minute, because Neelam Krishnamurthy, you're someone who's dealt with a number of such cases. Let's take it one by one. That there is gross insensitivity and misogyny is something we're not even going to argue over here. But where this sensitization is concerned, let's begin right at the point of the medical examiner, that archaic two-finger test that every rape victim, rape survivor has to undergo. The violation, the double violation of the woman begins there itself. How can we change this?
I think it's first the woman is raped, then she has to go through the medical examination where a PV is performed on her, and after that she has to go to the police to give the complaint and narrate the entire thing. I think she's raped again. Then when she goes to the court and she has to give evidence in chief, she has to narrate what she's undergone, then she has to go through the cross, which is worse. And during the cross examination, the kind of questions that are put by the defense counsels, I think any victim would break down. They'll never be able to withstand that cross. So it's very important for the judge who's sitting there to actually, tell the defense counsel, all right, this is the question you need to put, and it should be a lady judge who's conducting the trial, and she should put those questions to that girl, and there should be a screen where she doesn't have to face all these lawyers, because I've seen what the lawyers can do to you. Here is a rape victim who's talking, because in fact I've gone through it as a lady myself, and I know what the lawyers can do to you. They can really make you cry, they'll intimidate you. So I think it's very important to bring about these changes in our entire criminal justice system. And the three important things, what is very important in these rape cases is there has to be certainty, swiftness, and because unless and the severity of the punishment, three things which are very important.
Right.
Because with the way the impunity with which the rape victim, the people go around raping girls, because there is no fear of law in our country.
That's right.
Everybody knows it takes decades for our cases to be decided, so they know we'll get the bail. So at the moment it's bail and no jail is the answer. But what it should be jail and no bail, especially for the rape victims.
Right. Should we even be surprised then that so many rape cases go underreported? Here we have an incredibly brave woman who's a professional. She took her perpetrators to court and is demanding justice, is fighting this case legally. Ms. Neelam Krishnamurthy, do you not get a sense that if a professional woman, if a strong educated woman could face this sort of harassment at the hands of, be it the people who are conducting medical examination or the investigators, the lawyer, what must be the plight of women, especially in small towns and villages where a lot of these cases are hardly reported, or even if they're reported, an FIR is not even registered?
You're absolutely right. Probably that's one of the reasons we've seen what's happened in Punjab recently. That's precisely what happens to all these victims who go and commit suicide. Some of them are so ashamed even to come in front of the police and give, narrate the entire incident, because they know the kind of questions they're going to be asked is going to be very difficult for them. They cannot pursue, they cannot even withstand all the pressure that's on them. It's a political pressure, there's pressure from the policemen and from the party, the accused. So I think a lot of the rapes in the country are actually unreported. It's very shocking that we've seen a 873% increase in the rapes from 1971. In 2011 it was conducted, and you can imagine the number of increase in the rapes in our country.
Right.
So that is the reason, and most of them are, and this is when I think most of the rapes are not even reported in our country.
I want to go across to the young girl from Delhi who's also with us in our studio. At the point where one girl first walks into a police station to register a case, we've seen most women don't even want to do it because they're simply so scared. What do you think should be the ideal mechanism which would encourage someone who has been the victim of a sexual assault to walk up to a police station without fear and have her case registered?
You know, I personally feel that the police needs to be trained in the first place as to how to deal with such kind of cases. When a victim walks into a police station, she should be made comfortable. You know, when she's telling what had happened, there should not be any interferences. You know, it's very important for the police to understand and listen to her instead of asking her too many questions. And you have to be absolutely sensitive, absolutely sensitive when you're dealing with such kind of case. And I feel personally that there should be proper counseling at the police station as well. They can call somebody from the NGO who can counsel the victim at that time, because the amount of trauma that a woman goes through can't be put into words.
Absolutely. Well, you nailed it there when you talked about sensitization, because that's one aspect that's been completely ignored at all levels, be it from the time that a rape victim undergoes medical examination or investigation that goes on, or even the trial where the victim is doubly victimized, made to relive that trauma over and over again. Let me also go across to Kavita Krishnan, who now joins us, a noted activist. She's joining us from Jantar Mantar. Kavita, thank you for joining us. You, of course, been leading this protest in the capital, at least for days now, for days on end. You've been out on the roads demanding justice for this girl and also seeking bigger change. Even as we see these protests take place today, we have to look for solutions. And when we talk about solutions, take us through the primary steps, the basic steps that we need to take here, so that there are some lessons that are learned from this terrible tragedy and they're never repeated again.
Yes. I think you're very right that we need to learn lessons from this tragedy. And today I've been thinking about two kinds of lessons. One is the lesson that we need to look inward as well. If we are saluting her courage, then her courage should give us the courage to do what we rarely do, which is look into our own society, our own families, and identify what it is and what we need to change that is giving birth daily to violence on women, discrimination on women. The other thing we need courage for, which I'm sure we have the resolve to go ahead and do it, is to demand accountability from the government, from the police, from the judiciary in our struggle for women's rights and freedom, because we are struggling in society, that's true. But these institutions should be backing the struggle of women for their freedom. In fact, very often we find that the opposite is happening. So the demands that we are focusing on are the accountability of the police. There has to be a well-publicized protocol for the police to respond to crimes against women, and if there's any deviation from that protocol, then there must be some consequences must follow. Then there are 1 lakh pending sexual assault cases in the country, and we want that they should move towards there should be some sense of moving towards a resolution, some sense of closure. So there should be that sense of will in fast-tracking those cases so that there can be justice within a time-bound period. Then the third major thing we are demanding is that the present laws are very poor, that's true, but the bills that the government has prepared are also extremely inadequate in many ways. And so we are demanding that they should announce a process of consultation with the women's groups in order to make those laws gender just. And having come up with gender just bills, we should then pass them in a special session of parliament. We should not be in a hurry for the special session of parliament to pass the bill as it is with just a couple of clauses changed, which are very cosmetic kind of clauses. We need to understand that the laws should be such that they are tailored to respond to different kinds of violence on women, that they are built on women's own experience of violence. And that is something which only the women's groups with a long history of working among women can tell us. So we need to be we expect the government to be talking to the women's movement.
Absolutely. Gender just laws are the crying need of the hour. A special session of parliament after adequate debate has taken place on exactly what laws we want passed to make women safe. Also joining us now from Kolkata is Nilanjana Chakrabarti, an activist in the city, and a lady who in fact was gang raped in Park Street, and there was a much politicized battle over that entire episode with the Chief Minister herself unfortunately leading the charge. I want to ask you first, ma'am. I'm just going to call you Cynthia just to make it more convenient for you. Cynthia, I want to ask you first, do you think that apart from the police, even when the case is registered, the trauma is unending because the wheels of justice grind extremely slowly, and which is why the demand that we are hearing now of fast-track courts is an immediate need?
Yes, I definitely feel that. The trauma that you go through when the tragedy occurs, and then the aftermath of it when you lodge the complaint in the police station, and then again the trauma that you face with the society ostracizing you. So yes, of course, and I believe that rape cases should be fast-tracked as well.
Absolutely. Well, so of course, focus needs to be on judicial reforms, but at the same time, we're talking about sensitization at various levels. We have with us Nilanjana Chakrabarti, a noted activist from Kolkata. Nilanjana, we have seen a couple of statements that have come out from political leaders, which have really created a furor of sorts all over the country, but keeping politicians, political leaders out of this, and just talking about the support that the rape victims of any sort of sexual offense need. Is there adequate support that they receive? Nilanjana, if you could hear me, I was trying to find out about how crucial do you think is support and counseling for the victims of a dehumanizing crime like rape or even other sexual offenses, and in our country, is there enough focus on something like that? All right, since we are having some trouble with that line, we'll try and go across to Nilanjana Chakrabarti, but let me quickly bring in Ms. Neelam Krishnamurthy, who has of course fought against the system for a really long time. Ms. Krishnamurthy, as far as support is concerned, and that is something which is really primary, because if we see abroad in countries, as soon as a case is reported, we have NGOs move in who counsel the victim. We have the NGOs work in tandem with the prosecution lawyers till the very end convictions or acquittals are announced. We don't see anything of that sort happen in our country. Why is that such an ignored part of this entire saga?
You're absolutely right. Be it victims of crime, of rape, be it victims of any other crime, you generally find a lot of compassionate groups who always come forward when these kinds of tragedies occur, whether a girl undergone rape or people have undergone any tragedy. You go on the net, you'll find a lot of them, but it's actually missing in our country. I really don't understand why. Either the people in India don't know how to deal with such situations, or probably most of the people prefer to chicken out. You know, they'll come on the road to give the support and everything, but a personal touch to it, you know, how you can actually go and give support to the affected person, it's very important. A little bit of moral support. Even if victims undergone something, if you have somebody to talk to who can actually tell you what's the right way, how to go about things, who can go and talk to the lawyers, follow up your case for you in the court, and who's by your side in the court, it will make a lot of difference. So I think it's time that the NGOs should come forward. There should be some NGOs who should come forward at this time, take over the entire case right from the time the complaint is lodged. And a very important thing, what I feel, what I have been watching this case, I think the moment the girl walks into the police station, we should only have women officers who will take down the complaint of the girl, and this should be videographed. The first complaint of the girl, I think that's very important. So once you have the videography, there is nobody who can do any trampling with it. Nobody can put any pressure on the girl. It doesn't matter what happens later. So I think, and even in the court of law, nobody can say, oh, it's an afterthought.
And also dismiss the police officers who refuse to register an FIR. Exemplary action should be taken against, because they have to register an FIR. If that hasn't been done, dismiss them. Don't send them on a paid leave, which is what
suspension.
Exactly. Suspension is just like a paid leave. Sunita Krishnan, talking about the societal support that rape survivors get, or rather don't get, I want to bring you in, because you're someone who is a survivor herself. You have shed the stigma. You've decided you do not want your identity to be concealed, your face to be concealed. What needs to be done to ensure not just the rehabilitation of a rape survivor, but also to help her steer through the entire legal process, because it's a long, draining, and at times very humiliating process?
I think first of all, one has to understand that rape is something that scars the body, mind and soul of a person. And it's not a one-time scar. It sometimes lasts for a lifetime. My own experience was 25 years back, and I still carry a lot of trauma of that time. Whether it is in my interactions with people, whether I go in a crowd, I still have times when I move in a crowd where I feel very nauseated, just smelling a body odor, or when I walk on the road, when the shadow of a tree falls on me, and I just shake up like that. So this is a trauma that has sometimes certain irreversible damages to the mind, body and soul, and therefore it has to be dealt very, very systematically. And I don't believe, I don't believe that women officers, like Mrs. Neelam said, are better. I feel that it is about the sensitivity, man or woman, whoever can handle it. Because I have seen really very, very bad women officers speaking very, very, insensitively to a victim. I've seen bad doctors, gynecologists. I remember once when we had rescued a 12-year-old girl from prostitution, and we had taken her to the hospital, and this gynecologist asked this girl to disrobe because she wanted to do a cervical examination, and this girl was a little shy. And the first thing that woman said is, when you were opening your clothes for so many men, you didn't feel shy? You're feeling shy before me? So anybody could be insensitive, and therefore the need of the hour is for a sensitive understanding with empathy. If you were in that position, what would you feel? If you were traumatized, violated, and made to feel like a bloody criminal by every damn person around you, how would you feel? And therefore, today, as a state, as a system, as a civil society, what we lack is a support system. We lack families who can understand the victim. In my own case, one of my greatest trauma was my family could not understand my nightmares. They could not deal with my nightmares. In daytime, I was a very brave young person, with strong resilience to overcome whatever I was. That is the front I put up in the daytime. But nights, you know, everything was coming back. It was nightmarish. I still have panic attacks. I still have nightmares and things like that. And my mom and my dad didn't know how to deal with that. So it's about how do we create that support system from the most closest near and dear ones to moving to say a whole team of mental health professionals, be it counselors or psychotherapists, who can help and support this person not to feel, you know, one is a whole world of people trying to make you feel dirty, cheap and, you know, unwanted and fallen. But also the fact is the victim herself goes through all that feeling, because having some strange men grope your body and strange men violate you doesn't give you a nice feeling in your heart. No matter how much you tell yourself this is not your fault, no matter how much you tell yourself this is a mistake that happened to me, it was an accident, there is that sense of distaste and disgust that you start developing for your body.
Right.
So you need a whole mental health system that supports to make this person understand that, you know, this violation of your sexual organ does not become the violation of yourself, your identity and your whole personhood. We as a country, we as a civil society, we lack all those support systems.
Absolutely. Well, Sunita Krishnan, just stay on with us because what you're telling us is really, really interesting and very, very pertinent to this discussion, because we are talking about how to take this fight forward. We'll continue to talk about the stigma, the shame that's associated with the rape victim, how that needs to be disassociated. If there is ostracization, it has to be the accused, the perpetrator of that crime, who needs to be ostracized. We'll talk about that in detail when we return after this short break.
A young 23-year-old girl has died, but all the anger needs to be channeled towards action, because Headlines today has decided it's time to prepare an agenda for change to ensure that no more such cases are allowed to take place in our country. It's a national shame and we mustn't let it happen again. A young girl from Delhi joins us in our studio. She's someone who's been through the horror of a gang rape herself. I want to ask you, we were talking about the lack of societal support just before we went into a break, and you yourself, it was only thanks to a good support system, was able to go through all of this. But despite that support, you still underwent a lot of intimidation.
Yes, absolutely. These are the tactics that the defense always tries. You know, they already know the fact that the woman is already traumatized and she's broken and shattered, and that's when they want to intimidate her, you know, by threatening her close people who are close to her, you know, her family, her friends. So these are the normal tactics that these people follow to shatter you even more. But this is one appeal to all the women: please do not get scared. You've been already wronged, and you will not let any other person through their tactics to wrong you even more. Be strong and stand strong.
Well, that's a very strong message that you're giving out to each and every woman in this country. We have Sunita Krishnan. She herself is a rape survivor and is a women's rights activist. She joins us from Kochi. Sunita, I would want to talk about the ostracization bit. The survivors who we have here in the studio are people who are independent, people who have chosen to speak out, people who have the courage to face the world, who probably have also got the support to face the world even after that traumatic experience. But there are a lot of people out there who do not get this sort of support, which is why I think the stigma that sticks and the shame that a lot of people associate with the rape victim and how they feel. How can we change that? How can we change that perception that surrounds a rape victim after the act?
I think the whole sense of shame and exclusion that one is subjected to is common for all of us. Even today, after 25 years, when I talk about my own ordeal, the kind of response I get from my relatives, like a couple of days back, my auntie was telling my mom, why does she keep on telling about this? Meaning, it's 25 years. does she think that she has been doing some kind of a Bharat Ratna activity that she goes around talking about her ordeal? So within our own private domains, the kind of support you get is actually quite minimal. In my own case, I chose to be a survivor. I said I do want to be a victim because I have not made a mistake, and mistake was done to me. I have been wronged, and I chose to see the power in me rather than the pain that I was undergoing, and I chose to discover the power in me. But very unfortunately, most young women and young children, the age of the human being who's getting raped today is going down, meaning the youngest child that I have rescued from prostitution, which is the grossest and the worst form of rape, is a 3.5-year-old child. Unfortunately, all these children and women don't get even that kind of a safety mechanism of able to looking into oneself, because the outer world is so, it is actually making you feel so claustrophobic and getting you, to haunt you and, hound you in a way. And that largely happens because of the way we are brought up as children. And for me, that is where the change has to be coming. Today, it's high time that we start talking about how are we bringing up our children.
Absolutely.
Our daughters, how are we bringing them up? Our sons, how are we bringing them up? Every time you teach a girl that your virginity is your asset, your wealth, and if you lose it, you lose everything.
You lose your honor.
Person.
That's the way it's projected.
Lost it. Yeah, you lose your honor.
Sunita, just stay with me for a minute, because I want to go across to the lady who's joined us from Kolkata. I want to ask you about the immediate support system, because your family comes in later. Sometimes even they can't or don't stand by you. At the point when you walked in to register your complaint, did you wish that maybe there was a group of people who would have provided you the psychological and the legal support that you desperately need and crave at that time?
Yes, I did. When I walked in to register my FIR, there were only male officers who continuously asked me if I had been raped. One by one, they kept coming and asking me if I had been raped, and I repeatedly answered them quite bravely, quite straightforwardly. I answered them, and there was not a single lady constable on duty at that time. And they had me in the police station from 8:30 in the night till about 1:15 in the morning.
Which is against the law. They can't hold you back. And do you think at that time that these people who violated the law at the time when they kept you inside the police station, action should have been taken? Had they been dismissed, such a thing would not have been repeated?
That was my whole point. The time when I went to make a complaint to register my FIR, I was told by the present IO at that time that I had nothing to fear, and he promised me justice. And though he kept asking me stupid questions, and his senior officers were making ridiculous comments, I at that time didn't know how to react, because it was my first time going to a police station, and that also after being violated. So I was pretty nervous at that time.
Right. Let me take that to Kavita Krishnan. Kavita, you just heard the ordeal of some of the rape survivors who's sharing with us their experience, what they go through when they first approach the police, when they undergo medical examination, when they withstand those trials, unending trials that go on in courts for years and years together. Let's talk about deterrence here, because that is also important. And if we can't go by the solutions that are offered to us by our politicians, some of them suggesting that women dress up provocatively, they should not be heading out at midnight. But talking about deterrence, the government mulling the fact that there should be a database that should be set up now to name and shame sexual offenders of any kind. Why just rapists? Offender of any kind, a man who's molested a woman, a man who's eve-teased, a man who's flung acid on the face of a woman. Do you think that's a sound idea?
You're asking me?
Yes, Kavita.
You're asking me?
Yes, Kavita.
You see, I don't think that making a database public is going to help. Okay, because for one thing, as we well know, the very vast majority of accused are actually those who are close to the family. They are known to the family. If you start naming and shaming, then you will never get people to complain. Okay. You will deter the woman from complaining, because she will be told there will be additional pressure on her not to file a complaint. So I think we need to think not in terms of just some outcry of what sounds harsh, but also in terms of what is in tune with what the women survivors are actually going through, which you just heard. I'm so glad that you're doing that in your studio. People ought to be listening to the women who are suffering. And I think that for them, yes, we need a database, and that can be available to the investigative agencies so that they can identify perpetrators and track them. There can even be some parole system, okay, to track those who are out of jail after being convicted for this kind of crime. Okay. There can be something of that order.
But I want to make that question to the girl in Delhi, because what is being suggested is a parole system. You were of the very strong opinion that this should be a non-bailable offence. They should not be even allowed to appeal for mercy, to appeal for bail at any point of time, because once they are out, it's you who are at the receiving end.
Yes, absolutely. It happened in my case that once the person, the accused, was out on bail, he tried to influence the witnesses. You know, there were few witnesses who had turned hostile, and he tried to also, put pressure on my family through some person or the other. So it doesn't help us in fighting our case. I mean, I am sure there are exceptions to it, but one judge must look into the facts and circumstances of a particular case and then decide on the bail. But I personally feel that it should be made absolutely non-bailable, so that the witnesses are not tampered with, or that even the prosecutors is not intimidated in any form.
So, Sunita Krishna, I want to ask you, the intimidation factor here at play, and especially in cases where we see powerful, influential people involved in cases like that, what can be done to the effect of checking this sort of intimidation at all levels?
Who are you asking? Are you asking me?
Yes, Sunita, go ahead.
I'm not asking, I'm just commenting on your statement, Kavita. I feel very, very strongly about the sex offenders directory. I believe naming and shaming is very important. There is a need to create a database, a directory of all sex offenders, starting from the eve teasers, molesters and rapists, because today the naming and shaming is happening of a victim, not the perpetrators. We don't know their names, we don't know how they look, they are all hidden, but the victim is all exposed. There is a need for a primary deterrence that needs to happen, and when primary deterrence comes, I think the intimidation level will come down. Today, what the environment that we have today is that they know they can intimidate you, they know they can put pressure on you from different levels and still get away freely. Nobody is going to do it. You look at it from Bhauri Devi's case 22 years back, with how much of impunity they walked away. There was so much of confidence that nothing can happen to them. That needs to be broken today. That impunity with which a rapist or a molester or any sex offender walks in the society, that needs to be broken, and that is where deterrence is important. And deterrence is not just about the big deterrence of castration and death penalty and all that at a higher level, but also about lower level primary deterrence that we need to create in the society.
Absolutely.
That even an eve teaser should think twice before he does an eve teasing, that looking at a woman with indignity can cause you a lot of shame.
Absolutely. They should be made to feel the shame, because if there is any shame associated with sexual offense, it is the assaulters who should feel it. Do you think, I want to ask the lady in Kolkata, do you think that would be an effective deterrent? Because why just have a knee-jerk reaction and ask for capital punishment? It should not be allowed to happen in the first place. Do you think it's an effective deterrent?
Sorry?
Do you think
didn't hear
naming
that.
and shaming, the entire idea of having a database of sexual offenders, that is an effective way to ensure that anyone would think twice before assaulting a woman in any way?
Yes, definitely I do. I definitely agree with that. But personally, I feel that I don't think anything can shame them. They know they can get away with it, and in most cases they have.
All right, let me bring Ms. Neelam Krishnamurthy here quickly. Ma'am, you were talking about deterrence, and there was somebody who here talked about that how this is not going to work because these people should even be allowed to come out on bail. Talking about naming and shaming, why is this significant? Because it also, in a way, puts focus on the accused and not the victim. And also, we could have legal provisions in our system while we're making UID cards and many other things, be it for issuing license or passports. If a person has this in his record, this will, of course, help the system, the police, everybody track him much faster.
You're absolutely right, because I disagree with the person who said that naming it shouldn't be, the database shouldn't be collected. I think it's very important. You must have a database, all the complaints which are in a particular police station, and with their photographs on it, because if it's a second time offender, immediately you click and you know this fellow has been doing it earlier. He's an habitual sexual offender. And what is important is the police should also they should make it public. It should be on the website. They should say what is the status of this case. Okay, we received the complaint on 10th, we filed the charge sheet on the 10th of next month. What is the status of the trial? Have the charges been framed? And if it's been stayed by the High Court, for how long does the High Court stay a criminal trial? In my case, there is a case of 509, which is outrage in the modesty of a woman. 5.5 years is an ex parte stay by the Delhi High Court. So are the courts allowed to give an ex parte stay like this? And if at all the trial is going on, they should know, all right, we've had so many witnesses, out of 10 witnesses, 5 have deposed, 5 are left. So this way we can keep a track of all the cases and actually see how fast the trials are going.
Absolutely.
The database is very important. I don't think we should do away with this. This should come in at the earliest.
And in fact, I want to bring in Sunita again at this point as someone who's dealt with many such cases also. Do you think that the accountability of the judiciary needs to be fixed? How long can these cases be allowed to drag on? How long can the survivors be made to relive that trauma?
I think it's not just the judiciary, I think it's the law enforcement agencies. Everybody involved in enforcement and judicial recovery has to be fixed with accountability. Starting from the time the girl enters a police station, a FIR to be lodged, there is a need for an SOP or a protocol on how an FIR to be lodged. I know of cases where an IO takes the statement, then the ACP takes the statement, when the DCP takes the statement, and after all the mulling and discussing and all the rest of it, they come to a conclusion where FIR has to be lodged or not. We need to have a time frame in how much time the FIR will be lodged, how much time the charge sheet will be made, and to fix accountability on these characters that if an FIR is not done in the first 1 hour, you will lose your job.
Important points that you're raising there. Let me just quickly bring in Kavita Krishnan as well on this. Kavita, we've talked about a whole host of things here, right from police reforms to judicial reforms to sensitization, setting up of a database. But it's also important to turn the gaze inwards. As we sum it up, how do you think people who are today outraged, pouring out in the streets, demanding justice, seeking some sort of answers from the government and looking at a larger change, what should be the immediate and foremost things that need to be settled, that need to be accounted for if we look for this change?
I can't hear ya. I can't hear.
Kavita, you're at Jantar Mantar, and I can imagine there are a lot of people coming in behind you. Must be a lot of noise as well, people holding these protests. I just wanted to know from you what should be the immediate and foremost thing that we should be looking at as we talk about bringing in a change in the mindset and change as far as reforms in judicial and police level is concerned.
Speak, please. I'm saying what in brief, I'll try and say what we've been trying to demand. We are saying I completely agree that you need a well-publicized protocol of what exactly the police must do, what a woman must expect when she enters a police station to make a complaint, and that if there's any deviation from that protocol, then the police officer in question and his superior too must face consequences. Absolutely, I completely agree there. This is one of the key demands we are raising. The other key demand we are raising is that there are 1 lakh pending sexual offence cases, sexual violence cases in the country. We believe that they must be fast-tracked so that there's a sense of closure, and that we must move fast towards ensuring that these reach some kind of closure and conclusion and justice at the very earliest. And we are also asking that the existing laws they do not cover the wide range of violence that women face, and the bills that the government has introduced are also extremely inadequate. So we are asking the government to go into a broader consultation with the women's groups. They have to listen to women, they have to listen to rape survivors, they have to listen to women who have been working with such the affected women, and then they have to frame laws that are actually talking to and respond, that are tailored to the actual experience of what women are going through, and that is possible only when they start talking to the women's groups and to women themselves. And having done that, they should make gender just laws and then go towards a special session of parliament in order to pass these laws.
All right, and I think Nilanjana wants to come in at this point. Nilanjana, you wanted to say, you wanted to interject at this point. What is it? What's the point you want to make?
I want to add one more thing. All this is all very fair and should be done, but one very important immediate thing that we can do right now is have a special women's cell in every police station, and everything that takes place, all the recording of statements, etc., FIR, gender diary, whatever it may be, should be recorded, and only by women officers. This is the first immediate thing that needs to be done, because unless we get them this won't take much of a time. Because if every thana or police station has this a woman's cell who records each and every complaint based on a bit of discussion with the seniors or whatever, I think some headway would be made, and then the rest can follow, because the victim in any case is very, very traumatized.
Absolutely.
So facing that trauma, if a woman is there, I'm sure it'll at least have a balming and a calming effect on the victim initially. Later on the proceedings can take over, and the rest.
All right,
can
I
follow.
also want to get a final word from the lady we have in our studio in Delhi. To all those people who are angry today, what's the one thing you want to tell them, that this is what they need to stand up for, this is the change that you want, because you're someone who's still fighting that case?
I agree with almost all of you that judicial reform is must, but there's one point that I would like to make is that yes, judiciary has a crucial role to play, but we as a society needs to change our attitude. We need to change the way men relate to women, the first thing, and we must look at the social factors around these kind of violence. And we must, every home, we should start from our own home, teach our brothers, our sons, how to respect a woman. That's respect a woman, and that's very important. And I would like to say that yes, it is very sad that the death of a girl actually woke this nation up, but we must not let this die.
But it's an important debate that we must debate, and which is why we are discussing this right now, and we are talking to rape survivors. All of you very, very brave to have come out and discuss your ordeal, and also share with us solutions that you feel are important, steps that need to be taken to ensure there is justice and never a repeat of an incident like this. I'd also like to take in final comments from our guest in Kolkata. She's a survivor of rape in the city. There was, of course, a lot of political storm over that. But as we debate this issue threadbare, as the national attention is on the issue of women's safety, do you think it's finally leading us somewhere, or do you feel this outrage will dissipate in some time?
Well, I hope it doesn't dissipate at all, because it took a tragedy like the 23-year-old to finally have all the states have an awakening towards the crimes and the tortures that women have to face on a regular basis. Even today, even while traveling, many of the women still get teased and molested. So the mindset hasn't changed at all. And yes, I really do hope that this does not die down, and the public continues to ask for justice and make sure that the justice is delivered spontaneously.
Thank you very much to all the ladies who've joined us here on the show today. It's really brave of you to have come forward, spoken to us, because we're looking for solutions, and drawing from your experiences, we're going to get those solutions. Another girl raped and forced to commit suicide in Patiala, and now the ASI in that case has been arrested. The same man who refused to file her FIR, forcing her to take her life. This is the sort of enforcement that we need, and this is the sort of enforcement that we'll keep campaigning for on Headline Today. Thanks so much for watching. The news continues on the other side of a quick break.